It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast to tell you that US Cellular is introducing US Mode. It's kind of like airplane mode, but it's for people. It's a way to set up your phone so it doesn't get in the way of people really being with each other. Block distractions and make way for real connection. Give it a try. Visit US Cellular in-store or online, and they'll help you set up your phone for US Mode for free, even if you're not a customer. Built for superior 5G connection and real human connection. US Cellular, built for us. Find out more at uscellular.com/find us.
We're back, baby. The dynamic fantasy hockey duo is whole once again. My boy Steele is here for the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, just in time to bid farewell to one of the stand-up acts of the NHL over the past number of years, Patrice Bergeron. What does it mean for the Boston Bruins and other fantasy value? And we're continuing the rewind on the 2022 Fantasy Hockey Draft. Happy Hump Day. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, hockey heads? And welcome back inside the lab. That is your source for fantasy hockey takes, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Whole once again, my co-host, Mr. Steele Roden, back centered in the home province of Ontario, and your boy Big Flip Livingstone, of course, on this side of the microphone. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day, even throughout these dog days of the offseason. Steele, the summit is upon us. I'm already feeling hyped for hockey, but we got to maybe take a little reflection moment on today's episode. Patrice Bergeron bidding farewell to the NHL after a 19-year, you know me with the numbers, 19-year NHL career. My goodness. We'll break that down. We'll talk a little bit more about the Boston Bruins and what it means for their fantasy assets. But more importantly, perhaps, second round in our Listener League Fantasy Draft Rewind. This is where things already started to get dicey, Steele, and that's where I think you and I are going to talk about today. The first round, it's set in stone. But what goes on in the second round can make or break you. Kyle Connor, Artemi Panarin, David Pastrnak, Victor Hedman, and others. We'll get to it all on today's episode, which is sponsored by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Steele, I've missed you. I've been throwing love your way the past two episodes. What I need to come on here and say is, I can't do this show without you. I know the listeners have been missing you. I'm hyped to have you back in the booth. I'm throwing it right over to you because this is big news, not only for the Boston Bruins, but also for their fantasy pieces. What are you seeing here? What do you think? Because Morgan Geekie and some of these other pieces are going to get a real good look to fill this very, very big hole.
Yeah, it does mean a lot for fantasy assets for the Boston Bruins. And it's going to be a different look for the Bruins and their fans next season. Obviously, with Bergeron now retiring, the question mark remains with David Krejci and a few other players with where their future lies with Boston. I want to start with Patrice Bergeron, though, because just an incredible career. Like you said, 19 seasons in the league, 1,300 regular season games, 1,040 points. I'll let you list off the playoff stats because you've got those front of you. But,
I do.
You know, as a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, we
go.
obviously hate the Boston Bruins, but I have so much respect for Patrice Bergeron. I have so much respect for what he's been able to accomplish both internationally as well in the National Hockey League, you know, winning Olympic gold medals, winning the Stanley Cup in his career, fighting through injuries season after season, playing till he's 38 years old in the league is just an incredible feature and an incredible feat to accomplish itself. So Patrice Bergeron is just one of those players that he's such an excellent player, but that's not the thing that comes to mind. It's his character. It's the way that he handles himself on and off the ice amongst his teammates, amongst his colleagues, and amongst his opponents. And, you know, former coaches, current coaches, the way he handles himself as a person is always the first thing that comes to mind. I just saw Sidney Crosby posted a little tweet acknowledging the retirement and saying the exact same thing about Patrice Bergeron and the character that he has. So that's the number one thing. Just an absolute stellar career for Bergeron. But it does mean some fantasy value, for some other players, like you just mentioned, Morgan Geekie, who just signed with them.
Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle.
Yeah, he could get up to second line center minutes.
Mm-hmm.
He probably will start on that third line to begin with. But Morgan Geekie was a player that I looked at a lot in Seattle last year when he was on the roster and playing. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a different look for Boston. Like, they still have David Pastrnak, they still have Brad Marchand. They've got Jake DeBrusk. They still have Charlie McAvoy, who, the peripheral stats might be underwhelming, but still a stud on the blue line.
Right.
But it's going to be different. Where do they fall in the standings? Where do the fantasy points add up? Mm-hmm. I think David Pastrnak is still a first-round pick. Brad Marchand is still up there as well. Maybe not a first-round pick, but at least top 4, top 5 when he's on his game. But, when you look at those guys that the Bruins just brought in to fill in those other positions that Bergeron and Krejci have left open potentially, there's some fantasy value to be had with a guy like Morgan Geekie for sure.
That's the guy who I have my eyes on the most, Steele. And maybe we'll leave those takes for some of our fantasy previews, because I do, like you said, want to focus on Bergeron. And honestly, everything you just said is exactly how I feel about this player. And I think you know how good a guy is if he's on one of those teams and he's the guy that absolutely buries the team that you love. And I feel like Patrice Bergeron has been right at the core of that for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's just been so steady. And I think if there is one player, you and I have come on this show quite a bit, and we're trying to separate our love for what a player can do on the ice and what it means for their team success and what it means for your fantasy team success. And very, infrequently, is there a player like Patrice Bergeron who I think is equally as important? Sometimes you have to separate the fantasy value for what they bring on the ice or vice versa. And he continued to bring it all over the course of his career. You mentioned the postseason. How about this? 128 points, 50 goals, 78 assists in 170 games. And while we're just showing this man his love and giving him his flowers, which he is so deserved, and he is a shoo-in, first ballot Hall of Famer. And, you and I will probably be still on this show talking about it because I don't think it's going to take very long for him to get in there, Steele. That cup run that they did in 2011, how about the man was also winning his draws over 60%?
Yeah.
One of the main reasons the Bruins were so good for so long was puck possession, and that just speaks to his quality. I was on here yesterday, though, Steele, saying if he comes back next year, this year, and now it's not, I was still looking at him as a very, very relevant fantasy piece, as someone who, look, I hate that he buried the Leafs so much. But if you can't give the man his credit as just a stand-up act on and off the ice, you have to give your head a shake, and I want to leave it at this for you. Quote from Patrice Bergeron. When I was 12 years old, a teacher asked me in class to write about our dreams. For me, my dream was clear at 12 years old, to become a professional hockey player. And now it's time for him to step away, Steele, and he says he's probably a little naive to think he was going to do it. I don't think he was, because he had all the makings of an absolute gem. But the question remains, and you and I were wrong last year, and I'm going to turn it right back over to you for this take, and we'll head on to our draft rewind and all that. What does this mean for the Boston Bruins? Because Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman are arguably still the best tandem going into next season. But we know this, don't we? Linus Ullmark is not going to put up the numbers that he did this year. There's more age on that core. Now Patrice Bergeron is out, and Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle have to be your two guys up the middle. I'm saying this team needs to really rely on their goaltending and their back end to make that postseason again. They're not going to replicate the success they had last year. And I'm not just saying that because of the historically good one. They're going to struggle at times this year, I think. Also, that Atlantic division has gotten a lot better.
It has gotten a lot better, and I think they will struggle as well. I know they are the big bad Bruins, and they've been the big bad Bruins for so long now. But when you consider what they've lost just this offseason, they lose Tyler Bertuzzi, they lose Dmitry Orlov. I know they only got them at the trade deadline, but they were stellar in the postseason. They were stellar when they got them at the trade deadline.
Yes, sir.
They lose Bergeron, potentially losing David Krejci as well. So their defense has gotten a little bit, it's gone down a little bit in skill level. Their forward group has gone down a little bit in skill level. They brought back Milan Lucic, who's
Kevin
an older
now.
Kevin Shattenkirk. So a couple of veterans, slow veterans at that. So they still have a couple of talented players. But again, Morgan Geekie is pretty much the only one that I'm facilitating that has been acquired this offseason that could bring some fantasy value as a young player. So again, David Pastrnak, they've got Jake DeBrusk, Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy.
Yep.
They've got some great players, but that division is probably the toughest division. The Eastern Conference in whole is very tough, but what the Ottawa Senators have been able to do, Detroit getting Alex DeBrincat now, Buffalo just continuing to get better and better.
Thank you.
Montreal is the only team at the bottom right. Even Montreal has got some young, talented players. If they can find a goaltender, then they could be even consideration as well. But the Atlantic Division is the toughest division moving into next season, and I have no doubt in my mind that that's correct.
Yeah, and the East just in general is stacked up, and that means they're going to have to be on that wild card bubble, perhaps. Hey, you and I said this last year, and we were proven very wrong.
Way wrong.
But listen, this is what happens. You and I don't cover one team. We cover every single team in the NHL and have to throw out predictions on every single one. So sometimes we might fall a bit short, but the other thing I wanted to mention, James Van Riemsdyk, and you mentioned the stud players, David Pastrnak is an elite player, first round fantasy pick, and anyone getting a piece of action with him, whether it's Brad Marchand or also they brought in JVR. So if maybe they want to spread out some of that talent and bump Marchand down, bring up JVR to play with Pastrnak, I'm really starting to like some of these peripheral angles. But also, lastly, we're going to get to our rewind. We're going to get to it all. They got a whole lot slower. James Van Riemsdyk, Milan Lucic, Kevin Shattenkirk. The rest of that division got faster and younger for the most part. You know, the Leafs, okay, maybe they didn't. But you know what this game is played like, Steel. It's high pace. It's high octane. Let's see what happens with those big bad Bruins, because they have been also very good at putting us both to shame. Where there is no shame is taking your bets to FanDuel to make those wagers on MLB. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting on the MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $2,000. That's right, just $20 down and you'll land $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose. That is $200 you can be spending on everything, from the money line to the total to who you think cranks that first dinger, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, you know you're getting that instant payout with FanDuel. There's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
There's no off season for the true NHL fan, and there are no off days for Locked On NHL. This offseason, Locked On NHL has you taken care of. In just 30 minutes every day, Locked On NHL will give you the latest on all the fireworks of the NHL offseason. Locked On NHL, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Please hit that subscribe, hit the follow button, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Flip and I appreciate all the love and all that support you show us every single day, especially in the summertime. We're in the off season right now and you're still tuning in. We absolutely love that from our listeners out there. Again, keep your eyes and ears peeled for the details of our fan listener league that will be dropping later in August. Mid-August, probably we'll finalize those details. But thank you so much for tuning in every single day. We'll continue our draft rewind from 2022 into the second round. Starting with Kyle Connor of the Winnipeg Jets, coming in at 24th overall, the last pick in the second round of our fantasy league. And I actually want to throw this over to you because I know you're very keen on Cole Perfetti. You like some of their other guys as well.
I am.
I know Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele are still on the trade block, could potentially be moved. So how do you feel about Kyle Connor going 24th in the second round? Where do you think he should go next year?
Man, this is one of those tricky ones. And I think we alluded to the fact that, you know, the first round is the first round. And I don't think we need to rehash, you know, you made a good point to me off air. The first 15 players are probably for the most part interchangeable depending on your format.
Yeah.
But this second round got interesting, Steele. And I think another angle we always talk about is what happened the year before. Mm-hmm. And what did Kyle Connor put up? 93 points, almost 50 goals, 47 of them to be accurate. And hey, are the peripherals obviously leaving a lot to be desired? Of course. But from the pure fantasy offensive standpoint, I actually don't hate him in this position. This year, I'm saying he has to slide a bit. Some of that unpredictability of what we're expecting in Winnipeg. Yes. You mentioned those, Scheifele. It feels like this is what's going to happen, Steele. Scheifele's going to stick around for most of the year. Hellebuck maybe the whole year, but maybe they try and get value out of them by playing a good start. There is a lot to still like, though, in that mix in Winnipeg. Ehlers, Perfetti, Velarde, Niederreiter, even down that lineup a little bit. So I think there's still value there, but let me bring it all back to Kyle Connor. Last year, 31 goals, 49 assists, 80 points don't come around a ton, Steele.
Yeah.
So I don't think he slides that much because I think his offensive ability with all those young players that are still there, and yes, I'm going to stop talking, he slides, but I don't think he slides that much. Maybe 5th round. I'm okay with Kyle Connor. 5th, 6th.
I think 6th might be a little bit too far for a guy like Kyle Connor, but I agree with you. I think he definitely
slides. This is why
slides.
I need you back, pal.
I think he definitely slides down the draft board here. Like you said, 93 points 2 seasons ago. For me, I believe that's actually his peak. And Kyle Connor is an excellent player, but 93 points is his peak. That's the most amount he's going to get. And again, Winnipeg is just a bit of a mystery. It's a bit of a question mark about where this team, what this team will look like next season. So I wouldn't go as far as the 6th round, but I think early 4th, maybe even late 3rd round. This guy, like you said, he's a consistent 30 goal scorer in the league. He's still playing with some elite players and 80 points. It's hard to come by. And I think he can still put up 80, 85 points. I just think 93 was his peak. So you know what? If he slides down to the 5th, I'm okay with that too. But I think the 6th, if you get him at the 6th, that's an absolute steal in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think really it's the caveat that you mentioned. Again, what did we say last year after all the Paul Maurice drama and the off-ice issues? Obviously, something isn't fully smelling right in Winnipeg. So that's really hard for us to put our finger on from a fantasy side of things. But I agree with you. Thank you for reining me in. Cole Perfetti, Gabe Velarde, Nick Ehlers healthy, Kyle Connor, even Scheifele goes, Vlad Nemestikov's a bust. Adam Lowry can slot up. Alex Iafallo can slot up. Nino Niederreiter can slot up all over that lineup. I think this team, they brought in Rasmus Kupari, very interesting name. They have some bottom, Sixers that I like that I just mentioned. Josh Morrissey, Neil Pionk. There's some offense here, Steele.
That's actually the thing, too, is that I think Josh Morrissey might have peaked last season. Well, he went from 37 points to 73. So I think that has some factor to play in it as well. Sorry, continue.
Yeah.
Sorry to
this is exactly what I'm saying. So I think you can still expect fantasy value and offensive punch. It's just what happens if you draft Kyle Connor and his middleman, Mark Scheifele, becomes Vlad Nemestikov, or, I don't know. They slide in Gabe Velarde, who is a natural center. All of a sudden, you're not so happy that you took him in that 3rd or 4th round, but he clearly can bring it. And at the end of the day, what you want to say about the Winnipeg Jets is Connor Hellebuck stays there. He's still a top goalie. Mark Scheifele stays there. They still have a pretty good top 6 with some offensive punch. Just a lot of who is what ifs and who could be. Let's keep our eyes peeled. I keep saying that. Everyone's probably like, man, we need Steele back so bad, because all Flip said over the last 3 episodes, just keep your eyes peeled. But Steele, it's July 26th. We have to just be kind of waiting and seeing. You know what I'm saying? Because training camps are going to open. Line rushes are going to matter. Chemistry and injuries, and we'll break that all down. But for now, let's keep our eyes peeled, and let's head over to your boy, Artemi Panarin.
Artemi Panarin coming in at 23rd overall. He is my boy, the bread man. I absolutely love this player. I always try to draft him if possible.
Why not?
I like this player a lot. You get a lot of your fantasy points from goal scoring, and that's not typically his game. He can rifle the puck, but he has scored 30 goals 3 times in their career, but lately, 17 goals back in COVID season, 22 the year prior, and then 29 last year. So he is getting the goals up actually over the last few seasons. Went from 96 points to 92 points. So he's on a 90-point streak right now. the thing that, again, with a lot of players that have this skill level are those peripheral stats. There's no hits, there's no blocks. He's barely getting over 200 shots. You know, obviously you get a lot of, you know, alongside Mika Zibanejad, he gets a ton of his points on the power play. And a lot of those are assists. So, you know, there's a lot to love from Artemi Panarin. Again, the peripheral stats fall off a little bit. I think second round is maybe a little high, but I still think he's like a mid to late third round, early fourth round player. Yeah, he's got tremendous skill, and he's playing with so many talented players in New York.
The offensive side is where you take this player. 23rd overall in the draft after the year before that he had of 96 points. I don't hate it. Do I think maybe in other formats you could have probably let him slide and get someone who fills in the peripherals a little bit? Yeah, maybe. But also when you look at, you just missed out. So the pick we're going to talk about next is David Pastrnak. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I do.
Maybe get a little bit. Man, there's some interesting names on this board that we're going to have to get to for the rest of this round. But I'll just leave it at this. Blake Wheeler being added into the mix in New York is something that I'm intrigued by, because if he does stay on that second line seal, which makes a whole lot of sense to me with Vincent Trocheck and Blake Wheeler, they might be able to free up a whole ton of space for this guy to just feed them the puck in front of the net. I think 90 points is very much accurate in terms of what I expect for the Breadman. Again, I guess it just really be wary of when you take a guy who's so offensively loaded, make sure your next pick, or maybe the previous one, had someone who filled out those categories a little bit more. I've been at fault of that, but Breadman is going to bring that heat. And we know the Rangers are going to be right there in the mix still.
They will be right there. And he's always been a pass first mentality type of player. So that's where the shots drop off a little bit. He's always trying to find those teammates, but still very skilled, just like this next player. And this one's going to be very quick for us. He goes 22nd overall, David Pastrnak from the Boston Bruins. He's a top 5 fantasy player. He's not 5, he's not 4, but he is number 3, right behind Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, in my opinion. So even with the departure of Patrice Bergeron, and, you know, some other acquisitions that the Bruins have made this offseason, I think David Pastrnak can clearly carry the offense alongside Brad Marchand. He's just that skilled. He's so versatile. Great speed, great edge work, great release. You just never know where he's going to put the puck, because he can find any corner if there's an opening. So for me, he's a first-round draft pick, and he's at least in the top 5.
He's definitely a first-round draft pick still. I guess I'm just, you know, you brought up the exact point that Patrice Bergeron just means so much to this squad. The confidence, the balance, you know, he detracts some of those top defenders to him. The puck is in the offensive zone for them, and the possession is there because of how good he was on the draws. I think David Pasternak's offensive skills are pretty much good enough to negate most of those. But is he going to take, here, you and I again with these over-unders, I'll throw this out to you. I still think I'm comfortable in that 95 to triple-digit point range for Pastrnak. 100, I think, is where I'd predict. 113, though, I really don't see it, Steele, because I think there's going to be some growing pains in Boston, at least over those first few weeks, because if it is Pavel Zacha in there, they're just not going to have the puck nearly as much. So do I think 61 goals is something that is totally out of his realm? No, because he's nasty. But next season, I'm going to say 45 to 50, and I'm going to say 95 to 100 points. Still a first-round pick, in my opinion, because also, let's not forget, he was able to bring it when Bergeron was out of the lineup in the past, and he basically was able to fit right in on that top line and just snipe regardless of who he was playing with. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted there for a little. There I am. I am. I was muted.
He's rusty.
I think you make a good point there, because again, he was the goal scorer. He was the guy that Bergeron was feeding the entire time. Now he's going to have to be a little bit more of a passer, a facilitator for this team. So goals drop a little bit, but that means the assists might go up as well, because he's passing just as much more. Perhaps. So I agree. 45 to 50 is still in the realm. Maybe 100, 102, 103 points for David Pastrnak. Sure. 95 as well. You know, could in that realm. But again, he's still a first-round player. Wherever you take him, you got to take him in the first round. We got 3 players left to talk about: Victor Hedman, Ilya Sorokin, and of course, our boy from down south, Matthew Tkachuk from the Florida Panthers. what an absolute stud he is. His brother just got married. Did you see that Brady Tkachuk just got married the other day? And
I did.
You could have a whole entire roster from the lineup that he invited.
I did.
On his guest list.
Yes, the table settings at Brady Tkachuk's wedding were very, very interesting. I also respect that he brought in like even guys like Alex DeBrincat, who are now former teammates.
Yeah,
that would have been one of those, Steele, that I think you and I may have had to maybe wedding crash. Hey, I put maple syrup in my hair slick. I know all about it. But shout out to Brady Tkachuk. And you know what? Actually, if you're okay, I want to kind of keep this Victor Hedman conversation very short because, we have a lot to say about Sorokin and Tkachuk.
Yeah, let's keep it very short then. Where you think about Victor Hedman at heading into next season? Obviously, it was a little bit of a down year.
Yeah.
Surgeons of Mikhail Sergachev had a lot to do with that. But do you think he can have a little bit of a bounce back season at his age right now?
I actually do. I think also last year he just had a little bit of that mileage catch up to a guy that plays a very, very physical style. He also has, over the past 4 seasons, averaged, I think, 24 minutes in ice time per game, and that's just the regular season. So if you want to also factor in that the Tampa Bay Lightning have actually been the most successful squad since 2019, he's played, Steele, and hold me down on these numbers, pal. He has played 76 postseason games over the last 4 years. That's almost a whole extra year of hockey on a guy who is, and again, me and the numbers, 6'7" and 250 pounds. He still has a lot to offer. This is a guy that I traded for last year in a down spot, right? You and I talk a lot about buy low, sell high. I bought pretty low on Victor Hedman, and I think, Steele, you're going to see a little bit of a resurgence from him because also we know that his quality is there. 49 points in 76 games, not the 85 he put up the year before.
Yeah.
But to bring it back to this draft, if I'm looking at him, 85 points the year before, 36 PIMs, 129 blocks, almost 100 hits. I actually don't hate him at the back end of the second round, maybe a little early, but third round after the season before, I'm okay with it. This season, obviously he drops. Tampa Bay's losing some pieces, maybe losing some gusto in that Atlantic division. Here's my projection, Steele. I don't want to sleep too far on Victor Hedman because he does bring those peripherals. Say what you will about his ability to come with 85 points. 50, 55, very in the realm. He'll be over 100 blocks. He'll be near 100 hits. He's a little bit chippy with those PIMs, 42 last year. Here's my take. 5th, 6th round, I'm still taking Victor Hedman because after that, there's not many guys who still fill out the categories like him.
I'm very glad that you said that. Very happy that you said that he's going to have a bounce back season because I think so as well. And looking at his stats, he's only put up 85 points once. He's put up 76 points up once. I think in his realm, it's more 55 to 65 points. That's what we've seen consistently throughout his career. So I think 65 is definitely reachable for Victor Hedman.
Sure.
And like you said, those peripheral stats, 95 hits, 136 shots. He still puts the puck on net from the blue line. Obviously, the surgeons of Mikhail Sergachev this past year had a lot to do with that. And like you said, the mileage as well. Like we saw that with Andrei Vasilevsky a little bit in the playoffs.
Yes, sir.
Tampa Bay have played a lot of hockey over the last 4 seasons. Over the last 3 seasons.
Two banners in the rafters will do that.
2 banners in the rafters. So can't complain too much, but I think he does have a little bit of a bounce back season. I would go as early as the 4th round, 5th round as well.
Cool.
No later than that for me because Victor Hedman still has a ton of fantasy value. And so do these next 2 players, Ilya Sorokin and Matthew Tkachuk. We are going to get to them very, very quickly. But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all that support and all that love you give us every single day in the morning, 7 o'clock, Monday through Friday.
Yes, sir.
Make sure you go leave a podcast review on your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate all that support.
Yes, sir.
And continue with Ilya Sorokin, who's your boy, Ilya Sorokin.
Hey.
How are you feeling about him? Taking him in the 2nd round.
I think I just need to take the words right out of your mouth, and yes, we are starting to invest in this leave the goalies lie kind of approach. Because as more, AB 1-2 splits continue to be very prominent in the NHL, maybe you don't want to invest in goalies too early. My mistake was taking another goalie right after. You said it, Steele, and I fully agree. Because given how good Sorokin is, and maybe not the wins because of the Islanders, but I wasn't wrong in taking this guy that high, I was wrong. And then following it up with another goalie because Sorokin, 2.34 goals against, sixth best in the NHL. 0.9224 goals against, third best, and tied, or actually led the league in shutouts, Steele. So, yes, he is a victim of maybe not getting those wins. But when we're talking about the quality of goaltender, there are very few guys, and perhaps maybe none heading into this season that I like as much as this guy. But this is another one of those scenarios, Steele. We have to maybe try and separate what the quality of player is on the ice and what it means to the team's success and what it'll mean to your fantasy team success. And I think I got a little caught up in that. But, hey, it's a learning moment. And I think next year, Sorokin is should not be taken outside of the top 4 rounds, because the second that goalies start to go, I'd be fine with him being the first, second, or even latest third goalie off the board.
He has to be at least top 4. There's 4 goalies in the league. The first 4 goalies should be Connor Hellebuyck, not in specific order, but
here we go.
Igor Shesterkin,
I like this
Connor
conversation.
Hellebuyck, Andrei Vasilevsky, and Ilya Sorokin. Those are the first 4 goalies that should be hopping off the board right there, followed probably by UC Soros of the Nashville Predators.
Maybe Jakey Ottinger?
Maybe Jake Ottinger. Jake Ottinger's top 5. You know what? I'll put Jake Ottinger in front of UC Soros. So
thank you.
I like that as well.
You.
Those are the top 5 guys. But Ilya Sorokin has to be one of them. He has to be one of the first goalies taken off the board. It shouldn't be in the first round. Probably shouldn't be in the second round, but I would go as early as the third. I might even, third, because if you get that, if you take a forward in the first, defense in the second, goalie in the third, I don't mind that. But third, fourth round is where Ilya Sorokin should be going. I know he's one of the best goalies, but there's just so much more fantasy value in the forwards, in the defensemen out there. So completely agree with you.
And let's not forget the Islanders, right? They might
the Islanders
struggle to put up wins.
Might struggle, but again, it wasn't a bad pick. It was just taking your second goalie 2 rounds after is where you might have.
Pal.
Again, Ilya Sorokin, one of the best in the game. So is this guy right now, Matthew Tkachuk, coming in at 19th overall, an absolute beast. This is the same type of situation like David Pastrnak. They get taken in the second round. He's a first round draft pick now.
Yes,
he should be a first round draft pick, and he's proven that. He had an unbelievable season with the Calgary Flames. Says he doesn't want to re-sign, gets traded, follows that up with a more impressive season with the Florida Panthers, and he's just loving life right now. He obviously doesn't win the Stanley Cup. They get to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they're not able to secure it, but he has had a wonderful year, in Florida, living down south in the sun, playing with Alexander Barkov, Aaron Ekblad, a few other players. His brother just got married as well. He probably couldn't be happier right now. A Stanley Cup ring would make him a little bit happier, but no,
me too.
Excellent fantasy hockey player. He has to be going in the first round.
And I actually think, Steele, this was a bit of a slip on, my part and others in our league, because also we'll tease to, Moritz Seider was taken 3 points higher, 3 spots higher than Matthew Tkachuk in our draft. I think maybe that's a little bit of my fault for gassing Moritz Seider up a little bit too early, along with the rest of those Detroit Red Wings. But him being taken at 19th overall this year, especially after what he did the season before, was a mistake. And we should have really had our eyes on this. And maybe that move from Calgary to Florida and all of the madness that Calgary had going on, we didn't really know what the situation was. He wanted out. Maybe that was what scared some GMs off. But 40 goals, 69 assists, 123 penalty minutes, 322 shots, Steele, and he brings the peripherals a little bit. Yeah, you want to see those come up. 68 hits. I think he can bring more body like he did earlier in his career. You don't want to see him blocking shots because that's how important he is. So I'm not even going to bring that up. He is, in my opinion, Steele. There's Connor McDavid. There's Leon Draisaitl. And after that, I actually don't even hate you taking Matthew Tkachuk at the 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th spot. Because after that, I actually think it's a slip. And I would also, right in there after that, and maybe the back end of the first round, I'm actually also fine taking his brother, Brady Tkachuk, as well.
I've been saying that for a long time now. Brady Tkachuk, he might not be getting the points like his brother or some of those other talented players, but those peripheral stats, the penalty minutes, the hits, the blocks, they all add up. He's a late first-round draft pick, and I actually agree with you. I did say David Pastrnak should be 3rd, but I would, David Pastrnak, Matthew Tkachuk, Austin Matthews, Elias Pettersson. Those guys are interchangeable right there. So I like this. I'm very excited. I'm very excited for our next fantasy draft. But I agree with you. I think it's a very close debate with those 4 guys. And I agree wholeheartedly with the Brady Tkachuk take. I've been saying that for the last few years, that he is an early 2nd round, maybe potentially 1st round, probably getting to a late 1st round now. So very glad that you brought that up. Matthew Tkachuk, though, an absolute stud for the Florida Panthers. I would like to see him get a little bit more physical, get the hits up like he did early in his career. I don't want to see those blocks. I do not want to see those blocks. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I don't want to either.
But yeah, an absolute crazy 2nd round, second round with these players. I love this conversation. We're going to have to continue this. I'm very excited for our second time doing our fantasy hockey league. Like I said, make sure you're keeping your eyes and your ears peeled for all the details coming in mid-August for what's going on with our 2nd season of the Fantasy Hockey Listener League. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. We appreciate all the support out there. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.